So, Dave, you'd say we're an anime review show, right?
Last I checked.
Would you say it is appropriate for an anime review show to review American cartoon intros from the 80s that have nothing to do with anime, except that maybe some of them were made in Japan, contracted out in Japan?
Except for the anime rave, yes, anime is... It's animation.
Well, I'm okay with
Cartoons are animation.
I'm okay with putting non-anime things in.
We're good.
I'm okay with putting non-anime things in. Let's lift anime up a little bit, you know. God knows it needs it. So we love 80s cartoon intros. Not so much the 80s cartoons themselves.
Well, there was some good ones.
You'll often go to YouTube and see an 80s intro for something, and people will be like, man, I remember when the 80s were so cool, and nowadays TV's garbage. And I'm like, are you kidding me? There is more nuance and depth in 11 minutes of a modern cartoon than there is in entire 65-episode seasons in the 80s.
Depends on what show today.
Yeah, true,
if
but
we're talking Steven Universe, yes.
Like, a Steven Universe or Gravity Falls has more depth than any 2 or 3 80s cartoons you can mention.
Sure. But then we were talking and we decided that we're going to review and comment a number of cartoon intros from the 80s.
And the 80s is our first part. Like, This is what we're going to do first. We'll probably do the 90s. We'll probably do Disney shows. We'll probably do one for things we've had on the Anime Rave, where we just talk about intros of shows we've done on the Anime Rave, which will include anime, no doubt.
Now, these are in no particular order. They're not a top 10, a top 12, or anything else. These are just ones that we have liked.
We've thrown it out. We basically compiled a notepad list.
And we're just going to show them, and we're going to talk about them.
And this is an experiment. Maybe this will fail spectacularly. But at the very least, you'll get to hear us talking about cool cartoon intros, right?
And here we go with our first one, Mr. T.
Ah, the Mr. T cartoon. Now, something that always bothered me about this intro, which I love to death, by the way, is that the beginning shows a silhouette of a woman doing gymnastics, and then she turns into Mr. T.
It was Mr. T's team.
Yeah, but the woman turned into Mr. T.
So?
Like, is Mr. T her Super Sailor Scout form? When she transforms, does she become Mr. T? Is Mr. T secretly a young woman? But he's always in his Super Saiyan form.
So what you're saying is Mr. T's actually a 75-pound white woman?
Now, hang on. The silhouette, we could not tell the skin color of the silhouette.
You can't tell that's a white woman?
That we don't know if that was the silhouette. We don't know if any of the characters later are the silhouette. Yeah, they're all white, but that doesn't necessarily mean the silhouette is white. The silhouette was clearly a yellow person, which makes it Asian. Her. Asian. It. I am offending everyone. So, who's the useless jackass kid traveling with them trying to be Mr. T? Do you remember enough about the car? Also, I want to say this. Mr. T's intro is ballsy because this is one of the few 80s cartoon intros that, despite being awesome, animates like shit. It's using animation from the show, which was not very good.
No, it was pretty damn basic.
Pretty basic. But who is that kid?
Does it matter?
A little. For anyone wondering what the Mr. T cartoon was about, Mr. T traveled with a gymnastics team. And together, the gymnastics team with their gymnastics, and Mr. T with his superhuman strength, would solve crimes. And it's important to note that in this intro, Mr. T doesn't do a hell of a lot. But when he does do something, it's Giant throwing an alligator that's about to eat a kid and then smiling at the TV like a goofball. Despite the poor quality of animation of this intro, which is unlike a lot of the 80s cartoon intros we're going to see here, I think it's a super solid intro, honestly. I think the song is exciting. I think we get a bit of the action of the show, and in the show's own animation, so unlike Thundercats or SilverHawks, you don't see this amazing intro, and then you see the show and you're like, aww.
Yeah, they didn't try and go over and above. The tune is catchy, and the intro is just awesome.
It's telling that in the Robert Smigel cartoons that make fun of Mr. T on Saturday Night Live, they still use that theme.
Yeah.
And, yeah, okay, partly for the humor of it, and partly because it's legitimately, like, it's an exciting theme. It's the show itself, hit or miss with its episodes, but you can't deny that the song sets this expectation of excitement, and you're watching this, you're seeing gymnasts do stuff, and you're like, what's this going on? And then Mr. T throws an alligator, and you're like, oh yeah, right, they have a super strong black man with a mohawk on their team.
And he isn't yet playing World of Warcraft.
No, so he's not yet a Night Elf mohawk. He is pre-Night Elf Mr. T throwing alligators for daring to try to make a snack out of a young Puerto Rican boy in the boat?
Sure.
Hey, look! A Dungeons and Dragons ride! Wow, neat!
Give me a break.
I don't like this!
Whoa! What's happening?
Whoa!
Where are we? Look out!
Fear not, Ranger. Barbarian, magician, thief, cavalier, and acrobat.
Who was that?
That was Venger, the force of evil. I am Dungeon Master, your guide in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
So, Dungeons and Dragons. I think this is another solid intro. It tells the whole premise of the show immediately in an intro and gives us a taste of the action. One thing I always liked about the cartoon is that some of the characters did not have the roles you would expect them to have. The leader, the blonde, like, athletic leader, is the ranger and not the warrior.
Which, by itself, is funny, because, yeah, back then, the warrior would have been, your leader class.
That's
whereas, in today's media, a ranger being the leader is no problem.
Yeah, because of
Lord of the
Legolas.
Rings.
But this was pre-Legolas, right?
Yeah.
This was back when Legolas was known as a book character who
Technically,
couldn't
it wasn't.
grind rails.
Technically, it wasn't pre-Legolas.
It was pre-movie Legolas. It was
yes.
pre-Legolas can take on a quarter of Sauron's army. Like stuff like, the nerdy kid was the warrior and the little boy was the barbarian.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna just throw this right out here.
Oh, please don't.
This cartoon is the reason I started masturbating. Because
The audience did not need to know that.
Because Sheila, the thief, and the very attractive black girl whose name I don't remember. I'm going to say this right out, not just in the intro, but in the show. These are teenagers, but their outfits and their getup are far too stimulating for any young person who is attracted to women. And The freaking exposed thigh on Sheila there was so much for my young mind to handle. Too much, arguably. People say Sailor Moon helped them through their formative years. No, me, it was watching reruns of Dungeons and Dragons to see that delicious thigh. Also Sailor Moon.
I'm gonna surprise you on this. I'm not a big fan of the Dungeons and Dragons intro.
Is it because there was no gelatinous cube in it?
No, it's very basic. Yes, it gives you a very quick intro to what happened and how it started, but there's no real, catchy tune to go with it.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. You're not wrong.
And really, all you're watching is like the first 2 minutes of the first episode. It's not really an intro like all the others that we're about to watch.
I would argue that it is an intro.
It is an intro,
but it is perhaps not as exciting.
It's not your typical 80s intro that was there to pump you up and get you into it. It was, hey, here's the idea behind the show. Watch.
To be fair, that is the minimum an intro should do, and sometimes intros don't even do that.
Sure.
So you got to give it credit for at least you're not after you see the intro of that show, you should not be confused about it anymore. When the episode comes on, it should be pretty laid out. These kids are trapped in Dungeons and Dragons world. There's this evil fucker named Venger after them, and goddamn, one of them has thighs that you can just suck on.
On to the next one.
I think the M.a.s.k intro is one of those that kind of starts, and then just in the middle, just turns the adrenaline up to 11, because when you reach that chorus, and they're like, M.a.s.k, that's when the song, really hits its stride, and you're like, wow, yeah, I'm up for this rather mediocre cartoon.
The mediocreness of the cartoon / comic aside, I like it from the first beats because it is a song that starts out and just builds. It builds to the chorus, and it's just...
It does build.
Everything from what they're showing you on the screen to the music, everything just ramps right up to where you're in combat, things are happening, you got the bad guys on the screen, you got transformations going on. Fuck yeah, I want to watch this show.
You've convinced me. You're right. It does build, and there's something to be said for starting slow so you can build and really just knock it out of the park.
Yeah, this is an intro that would have had me as a kid saying, fuck, I want these toys.
Yes, and that's what a lot of these shows were, vehicles to sell toys.
Absolutely.
Although occasionally there was a good show in there. I have a few questions, though, about the M.a.s.k organization's HR policies. Obviously, they demand a lot of overtime. As mentioned by the song, they're working overtime to fight crime. Secondly, that kid appears to be a member of the team. Now, maybe he's not officially a member of the team, but he's a member of the team.
He is.
And his face is exposed. Whereas the song makes a point of saying nobody knows what lies behind, which means the masks are there also to protect their identity. That kid needs a mask.
Yes and no. Here's the thing. No one knew who...
No one knows what lies behind that mask charade.
No one knows who the bad guys are behind their masks. The good guys are at least known to the government.
Sure, but give the kid a mask!
The kid was the leader's son.
Sure.
And
thereby mask leader in waiting, one would think.
And unlike what the intro shows us, that doesn't happen. He may get involved, but he never exposed who he was.
Fair enough. I think he needs a mask.
It's creative license simply for the intro.
I will say I do like the Robot Chicken version of this intro. It's not quite as pump you up, but it has some funny lines like, and behind those masks are dudes with ordinary faces.
Yeah.
And my personal favorite, helicopters that turn into smaller helicopters.
Now, what's funny about M.a.s.k. is that it was one of many shows that their masks or their suits gave them a single power. Most of theirs was like a telekinetic blast and stuff like that. But there were a lot of shows that had that kind of idea going on, that it putting on their armor kind of thing gave them a one-shot ability. Sort of not entirely unlike a Super Sentai, Power Rangers, Sailor Moon kind of idea. And predate Noah, which they borrowed the idea from shows like Visionaries.
Actually, I would argue that what's it called? Gatchaman predates a lot of this, because that was 70s. And they kind of did that idea first. And then we get 80s cartoons, and then we get stuff like Sentai and Sailor Moon.
Yeah. So that was M.a.s.k.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the actual show itself wasn't that good.
Oh, most of these... Sometimes you'll go onto one of the comments section on YouTube of one of these intros, and people are waxing poetic about how much better TV was in the 80s. They are wrong. They are completely wrong. And most of these cartoons sucked. But goddamn, they had good intros. So yeah, next is the Smoggies, which has one of the longest intros ever. And this is going to be, I'm just going to be honest with you right now, I'm going to crap on this one a little bit. So, the Smoggies is an intro. That was never really my favorite, I'll be honest with you. Because A, it's way too fucking long. And B, it's... Every part of the song is upbeat and happy, whether or not it's the Sun Toughs or the Smoggies. And the Smoggies are clearly, like... Maybe they're not intentionally evil, but they certainly are pretty damn dark and grim and fucking polluting when they shouldn't be. But what always bothered me about this intro is the dire turn it takes in the last few seconds when we zoom away from that island, which is the only green place left, and the rest of the planet, which I assume is Earth, is just barren and brown, the landmasses anyway.
Yeah.
And we hear weird mechanical noises in the background as we zoom further and further out from Earth. like this is the last bastion of anything good and pure, and these assholes, these Smoggies, are trying to wreck that too.
Now, this is I never actually saw the show as a kid. I saw the intro a couple times, but it's been more, you and me going for nostalgia over the years.
Yeah.
I like the theme to this one, and the intro's music is very well done in the way that, you're right, it is very positive, it is very upbeat, but the Smoggies don't feel they're doing anything wrong. They're just doing whatever they normally do. They're on the mission to, live forever, get the magic coral, etc. But as far as actually polluting everything else, it's all they've ever done. So they don't see it being bad. I actually don't remember in the actual cartoon both sides ever talking about it. It was always one going against the other for...
Well, hang on. You just said you never saw the cartoon.
As a kid.
Oh.
As a kid.
Okay.
So, yeah, it remained upbeat until the end because, both sides felt they were right. This was very much during the period where companies were getting funding for doing ecological, cartoon-based stuff. And, their world was pretty much kind of crapped.
How ironic is it that this big environmental friendly drive in 80s and 90s cartoons like Captain Planet and the like ended up doing nothing because nobody learned, and now we really are up shit creek without a paddle today with environmental concerns that may destroy us. And a serious but we give more of a fuck now because now we're seeing the consequences.
Yeah, but
we're seeing severe weather severe weather events that should be happening once every 100 years happen every few years. We're seeing coastlines disappearing.
I would argue that governments give less of a crap now because giving money to shows like this to be made wouldn't happen today because it would be, doing the climate change agenda.
Yep.
In some ways, governments were willing to throw money at stuff like this in the 80s and 90s because even on a governmental level, it was still, we're doing studies and we believe it's bad. Now today we know it's bad, but they don't want to admit it.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as the intro goes, though, it was the longest one I can think of all the cartoon intros that we've seen. Maybe a couple of the British ones might have been longer, but this one was long.
It's definitely among the longest. It is huge, this song.
But it also told you what you needed to know about the show.
Yeah.
You knew who the good guys were, who the bad guys were, and what the goals were.
You knew so much from this intro, you did not even need to watch the show anymore. Arguably, this intro told us too much about the show.
Very much. Yeah, I can get that.
Despite that, the very subtle, grim way it ended was super appreciated by me.
Okay, this is one I suggested to put on the list, and this was a favorite as a kid, was the Generation 1 Transformers cartoon intro. And here it is.
The Transformers, more than meets the eye. Autobots wage their battle to destroy the evil forces of the Decepticons. The Transformers, robots in disguise. The Transformers, more than meets the eye. The Transformers.
A very simple intro, very quick, gives us our entire story, and gives us a fight with the Autobots and the Decepticons waging their eternal war. This was the very first Transformers intro that I remember, that anybody remembers. And while I think there have been better Transformers intros over the years, this is good. This gives us the whole story. We get that catchy theme song. We get the transforming noise. We get to see Transformers transforming. Ironically, it's the Decepticons that get the most play in this intro, with Soundwave and Megatron and others getting to do their transformed attacks very those were in the spotlight as opposed to the Autobots who are boring and dumb.
Ouch. As a kid, this intro would just get me pumped for the show. I loved Transformers. I still love Transformers today for the Generation 1, even the Gen 2 stuff. But this told you little more than you have two factions. You get some imagery, you get some shooting back and forth, but you don't really get more than they're Transformers. They can go from robot to a vehicle form, or even a gun. In the case of Megatron, or, you know, cassette tape, etc. This was very much the essential we're here to sell toys show. Yes, they gave it stories and everything else, and cheesy as it all was. There was some depth to the show, but the trailer got you in really quick. The theme going on is actually really well done. It changes a little bit, but it gets you pumped. The narrator or the singer in the kind of off-modulated voice was always awesome. I actually had one of the toys that allowed you to do that to your voice, and that was neat because that wasn't a person's actual voice. It was all modulated, and you knew it. Yeah, this one's a favorite of mine from nostalgia, but looking at it, it's generic as hell.
It's very plain intro. Sort of like the Dungeons and Dragons intro. It's like, it does its job. It does enough of its job, and it tells you the story. And now you can go watch the episode with a bit of a clue of what's happening, so...
You were never going to be lost in the Transformers, ever, but it maybe could have done a little bit better in actually giving you a little bit more information other than good guys, bad guys fight.
Later Transformers intros would do that.
Not really. It never really changed. The Transformers on screen would change, but it was the same intro. That never changed all the way through this original Transformers cartoon. It didn't change until they started hitting, Transformers. I want to say Primal, but that's not right. That was a character's name.
It's absolutely wrong.
Yeah. You know which one I'm talking about?
I know the name. Do you?
It's slipping my mind right now.
Beast Wars,
Beast Machines, all those. It wasn't until then that you got a new intro.
I didn't follow Transformers, so I'm going to have to take your word on that.
I only ever had a few of the episodes. I never actually got to see the series.
You're talking about Beast Wars, right?
I'm talking original Transformers.
Oh, okay.
But I owned all the comics.
And the movie.
The movie. Now there's where you start getting some things, but that's for something else.
Mm-hmm.
I could do an entire episode on the music in Transformers, the movie, the animated movie, not that piece of shit Michael Bay one.
Next, we have two 80s Care Bears intros. The first, which is boring and generic as all hell, and the second, which improves upon it in, like, every way.
Oh, gee, give it away.
I wanna be a Care Bear. Oh, it'll be so great when I'm a Care Bear. Well, I can hardly wait to be a Care Bear and do the things that Care Bears do. Oh, I wanna be a Care Bear like you. You do? I'd be like sunshine and make the sun shine. I have a heart like lava-lot. I'd be like Wish Bear and always be there. We'd be the luckiest bears in Care-a-Lot. I wanna be a Care Bear and fill the world with love. To be a Care Bear is what I'm dreaming of. We make a great pair. We stick together through and through like glue. I don't wanna be a cook or a fireman. Don't wanna play trombone in the marching band. I just wanna be a Care Bear like you. Just wanna be a Care Bear.
Care Bears countdown. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Who's that coming from somewhere up in the sky? Moving fast and bright as a
All right, so those were the two Care Bears intros from the 80s. There were more versions of Care Bears Countdown when they did weird stuff with that cartoon, like did space travel and whatnot. It was strange. I think the second intro, as I mentioned before we even started watching them, I think the second intro is easily the superior one because it's much more exciting. It's got much more a bit more percussion and more happening in the intro itself, right? We were introduced to No Heart and Beastly, and this was pre-Shrieky, but she came later. I always wondered something about the Care Bears. Their Care Bear stares repel evil and non-caring, right?
Yes.
So, if they fired them at Doctor Doom...
Oh, for heaven's
Doctor
sake.
Doom should be repelled by the Care Bear stare, right?
Something tells me his magic counters it.
Speaking of magic counter, when No Heart in the intro was using his cauldron to look at those kids like a creep, and then the Care Bears were there, the Care Bears fired their beam through the thing. How did the Care Bears know they were being watched? And holy shit, they can fire through this clairvoyance?
It was a little different than that. He was trying to use his potion on the kids, and them being there and caring bounced it back.
Oh, is that what happened?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
They actually did that in an episode.
That's great.
Here's the thing. The second intro, the second Care Bears cartoon was a reboot, really, of the Care Bears universe for the 80s kids.
Yeah, and
whereas the original Care Bears cartoon came way earlier and was a more... It was kind of like early Teletubbies without insulting everything.
Teletubbies insulted everything? Were the Teletubbies racist?
Depends who you talk to. But the original Care Bears cartoons, it was very... There wasn't really much action to it. It was very tame, slow-paced, relaxing. They rebooted it with the new theme and the new... showing the new characters after the first Care Bears movie came out, which put more life into the Care Bears themselves.
And added the Care Bear cousins.
And added the Care Bear
which included
cousins.
a vicious lion.
Yes. But that's what came from the first Care Bears movie, was the Care Bear family cartoon. And it was an improvement in every way, shape, and form, from the opening theme to the actual show itself. So in a versus match, yeah, the new one definitely beats the old one with a hammer.
And Dr. Doom just can't stand those little bears. Kuma Shock.
Thundercats!
Thundercats are on the move. Thundercats are loose. Feel the magic, feel the roar. Thundercats are loose. Thunder, 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 Thundercats. Thunder, 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 Thundercats. Thunder, thunder, Thundercats. Thunder, 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 Thundercats.
Yeah! Yeah, an original intro for Thundercats. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the original theme to the Thundercats I knew of years before I ever got to actually watch the show.
I don't think the song is that impressive, actually. I think the real impressive part is the animation.
Yes. I mean, don't get me wrong. The song gets the blood pumping. The song is upbeat and it just like the animation that goes along with it. Everything is constantly in motion things are happening, people are moving. There is not a quiet part of the intro once you get past Lino doing the thunder, and even then, he's always moving. The intro to this was like, holy crap, what is going on kind of thing. The lyrics, yeah, are kind of ho-hum. But the music and the animation was, and still is, very nice to look at.
It's a super good intro. Gets you super fired up. And even though the animation in the show wasn't nearly as good as the intro, it still wasn't horrible. I always wondered what the logic is of cat people fighting a mummy. It's not like they were fighting mice or dogs or things that were perceived to be the enemies of cats in popular culture. No, it was, okay, a bunch of cat humanoids. What's their enemy gonna be? Let's make him a big mummy.
Okay, but that would require me to go into much more detail as to the show.
Yes, true. And if we look at Egyptian mythos with cats and mummies, it makes a lot more sense.
That has nothing to do with it.
Well, then, weird. Still, really great intro.
Mumra was already on the planet when they and their enemies came there after their planet blew up.
Sure, fine. I'm just saying that as the dichotomy between cat people and a mummy just is, it's weird. It's like if you had a cowboy fighting Dracula. Like, I mean, it's just kind of unusual is all.
Yeah, let me get on the phone here to get Michael Bay on the line.
Oh, God.
I'm sure there's a movie in there somewhere.
Cowboy Fights Dracula, 2016.
However, the second intro is basically a 10-second homage to the theme of Thundercats, and that gets right into the show, so...
Yeah, we don't even need to discuss it, because it's not really even an intro. It's just a quick... Oh, here's Thundercats! Let's watch a cartoon that started kind of meh and got really good and then got cancelled.
Yeah.
Now, the SilverHawks intro... the Thundercats intro...
Yeah.
The Thundercats intro is really cool, but I think it's what these guys did after that really captures me.
Yeah, see, for me... Thundercats was definitely, again, I had one episode as a kid. And it was actually a rather important episode to the show. Which was fine, but that theme just gets you going.
So good.
There was actually a second theme to it, but that's not what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
This next one, I also had a single episode to.
Silver, birds of steel. SilverHawks, partly metal, partly real. SilverHawks, soaring through the highway of the heavens in their flight. SilverHawks, a rainbow in the night.
Yeah, I think SilverHawks is my favorite intro ever of anything. This intro has everything. It has amazing 80s music, amazing vocals, an amazing beat, amazing animation, a fucking guitar solo in the middle of the intro with one of the characters playing the guitar. Space Cthulhu and his minions. Lasers, spaceships. What does this intro not have? This is the best intro of any television program in history. Is SilverHawks.
I may not agree, but this intro is amazing for what it does. It, much like the Thundercats theme, it doesn't, again, everything is moving on the screen. Nothing stays still for long. Maybe a frame kind of thing. And the theme is just blood pumping. It is amazing in what it does. My only complaint is that it actually tells you very little about the show.
Yes, this is true. We know that they are the rainbow in the night, and that they are partly human and partly SilverHawk. And
partly real.
Yes, which by that they mean human. Like, we don't get much about the monster, whose name is, I think, Monstar.
Yes.
We don't get much of the conflict or anything. You're right. We don't get much of the story. But who cares? The show is nowhere near as good as this intro. This intro is just... I listen to this intro weekly, at least. When I'm feeling depressed, I will listen to this, and I will feel less depressed. SilverHawks, the rainbow in the fucking night. So, Denver the Last Dinosaur. I have always had some issues with this character. He appears to be a fully sentient guitar-rockin' dino who was revived in modern times and told stories about prehistoric times he was involved in. I watched quite a few episodes of this, and that was every episode. Every episode was...
I never did.
Every episode was he's hanging out with the kids in modern times. Some moral or lesson needs to be taught. So he talks about how something he had to do in the distant ancient past helped him, and he used this stone to help him see the past. And then after most of the story was told in the past.
Yeah.
And then they would come back to the present, and the nature of the moral and lesson was learned. So, I've always had a few issues with Denver the Last Dinosaur. First of all, he can fucking talk and communicate. And when he did his flashback, so could all the dinosaurs there. And I'm like, wow. Then where was the dinosaur civilization? Were they afraid of ripping off the dinosaurs show, which only came after this? Still, it's a fun intro. It's upbeat and lively.
I love the intro right up until the middle. The little middle section I could do without. When you can tell they really couldn't get it to be very lyric. They had to start talking a little bit to bridge the gap between segments. But the actual visuals and the theme, yeah, I could listen to it anytime.
It's not a bad intro.
We used to be 4 ordinary teenagers. Until one day, we met some new friends from out of town. They were called Dino Saucers. My friends and I became the secret scouts, allies to these Dinosaucers from outer space, and joined in their battles against Genghis Rex and the evil Tyrannos. The Dinosaucers are leaving, Bossasaur! Well, follow them!
Dino Saucers! The show I never watched, and honestly the premise doesn't really make me want to watch it. And the narration during the intro isn't all that special. What's awesome in this intro is that freaking song, man, and some of the action that happens in the middle. That's what makes Dino Saucers pretty damn cool as an intro.
Yeah, the narration could be removed very easily, but the visual, you know what you're getting into. The one thing that always got me, though, is why is it every time the bad guys have won and the good guys are leaving the planet you've been fighting over, why do they feel the need to follow and stop them?
Yeah,
you've won.
Let them go.
You've won your planet. Congratulations. There's no need to go after them. At least in something like Transformers, they were fighting over a dead world and one side was leaving to get energy to continue the battle. Kind of thing. There was a reason to stop them, not just, no, they can't leave.
It's really a puzzling predicament, but one could make the argument that there'd be no show if the bad guys did this.
Of course there wouldn't be, but from a literary standpoint, it's like, just what I just did a moment ago. You can't leave because...
It's the Doctor Doom conundrum. Anytime he takes over a place and he turns it into a utopia, it's always when the Fantastic Four and the other heroes aren't around, and he gets sick of it and wants to go back to normal Earth and beat them. He won already, but he just can't handle it unless Reed Richards is dead. And I support his initiative, because with those pesky Care Bears out of the way, poisoned by their cloud buffets that Doctor Doom had poisoned, he can finally take on that pesky Richards. Why was the logo to Dino Saucers a snake, and why did the snake attack us in the end?
Looked cool. Like a lot of...
Correct!
No reason other than to look cool and animate, remove the title from the screen.
Indeed.
Fade to black.
Surrender or pay the consequences.
Earth's most powerful soldiers are Earth's last chance to fight the spiral zone. Darkness has fallen on the victims of the zone. Our world calls for courage, peace and freedom. We must own. We will fight on our honor. What is right? We'll defend. Fight the zone. Zone rise. Earth's most powerful soldiers are Earth's last chance against the spiral zone.
Spiral Zone is one of those cartoons that when I bring up, people don't seem to really recognize. It was a late 80s type of thing, and for an 80s cartoon, I talk about how most of the cartoons on this list had great intros, but the cartoons themselves were kind of bleh. Spiral Zone was the exception here. At least at the beginning. Near the end, they ran out of money, they never finished the story, and they started just reusing elements from prior episodes. So ultimately, Spiral Zone is one of those things that's still in limbo, that could continue, really. Spiral Zone was, for an 80s cartoon, legitimately frightening, because the villain was uncompromising, and the malice he visited upon the Earth, which you see in the outro of the cartoon, is like this spiral zone around, like, just coiling the Earth like a malady, like a sickness. And it turned people inside into obedient zombies for him, like that kid in the intro. And even though there are your typical 80s cartoon elements, like the main character is called Dirk Courage and whatnot, the fact is that these heroes were so desperate to win that they would sometimes do the wrong thing. Like when they would try to find the villain's relatives who still lived outside the zones and use them as bartering chips. And it was cool because like you had like America and Russia teaming up and putting aside their differences, which was a big deal in the 80s. And I recall the Russian character once kind of laughed at the irony of the fact that they were doing this evil thing for the sake of good, and just a few years prior, America would have condemned it. There was some seriously cool shit in Spiral Zone, and that intro is amazing.
The intro, I have no complaints about. I've never seen the show, but the intro tells you everything you need to, from the visuals to the theme to the music. Is just a masterpiece.
And you have that, they even had that 80s like cyberscape effect at some point as well. Like, they just had to throw that in there at some point. The outro to Spiral Zone is arguably better because we get to see some of Earth. But I mean, the intro's still cool. This was an America-Japan co-production, and like I said, it got left in limbo. The story never got resolved.
That's too bad.
And I honestly wish that someone would just put money into this, remaster it, and finish it. But what do you do?
Well, you know, some shows are being brought back. So you never know. Somebody might.
Yeah, that's true.
You never know. I mean, heck, Nintendo actually released on DVD Captain N, the Mario Brothers, and Zelda.
They reluctantly allowed another distributor to release them. Nintendo did not want anything to do with that shit, and they had to have their arm twisted.
Any of them?
Any of them.
Really?
Yeah. There's a distinct lack of Nintendo branding on these DVD sets. I should know. I have them all.
Ah, okay. Interesting.
But we're going to talk about that in a moment.
This is the Triforce of Wisdom, Link. The evil wizard Ganon has the Triforce of Power. Whoever gets both Triforces will rule this land forever. You must help me, Link.
Hey, for you, Zelda, anything.
Nice job, hero.
Hey, excuse me, princess.
Dave, I have a metric ton to say about this intro and the Nintendo cartoons in general, so I'm going to shut the fuck up for a little bit and let you talk about this first.
So, this was really the first time we saw Link in a animated style outside of the first game. This even came up before the second game, if I got my timeline right.
It was around the same. They used a few enemies and settings from the second game, actually.
Okay.
Not that many.
But this is what really gave Link some personality. Is this cartoon right here. And it only was shown once a week. It was the Friday. From the Super Mario Brothers Super Show.
Every Friday was one of these.
Every Friday was one of the Zelda ones. And it just does so much. The intro, the music. Oh my god.
First instance of orchestral Zelda music? Probably.
I would say first time for orchestral video game music, period, was this. This was probably the first time they had orchestral video game music.
I'm pretty sure they had it earlier in the 80s, but definitely this is one of the most prominent examples of it early on.
And this intro was just so well done. It gave us the threat. It gave us everything we needed to jump right into any episode of the show, unless it was a two-part.
Mm-hmm. Which there weren't any two-parters in this show.
There you go.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I know you're bursting at the seams.
Here's the thing about the Legend of Zelda cartoon, and a lot of the Nintendo cartoons, the American-made Nintendo cartoons. Nintendo is ashamed of these things, and so are their fans. And that shame is so short-sighted. So here's the thing. This cartoon is not everyone's cup of tea. Nor does it have to be. It has flaws. However, The Legend of Zelda is legitimately my favorite Link. And I don't say that lightly. Because in this, Link that didn't have much of a personality in the games until about Wind Waker? And his personality was entirely visually expressive, which is fine. I have a soft spot in my heart for Wind Waker, even though I'm not a big fan of 3D Zelda. I'm more of a 2D Zelda guy. But I finished Wind Waker all the way through, and Link is super expressive in that. And before then, this was our Link with a personality. And there are people who argue that, no, it's not true to Link's character, which is a bullshit argument because he never had a character. And others who'll argue that, no, it's too self-serving. It's too much of a mercenary out for the poon. And I argue, why can't it be that? In the first Zelda game, Link was a traveler who they asked to save Zelda, and he went and did it. That's not that different from this show's premise where he was a mercenary hired to stand guard at the castle for an indeterminate amount of time because he was a talented swordsman with a laser sword. To stop Ganon's forces from taking the Triforce of Wisdom. And his personality was funny. Link is a legitimately funny character in the show. And I'm not just talking about "Excuse me, Princess," which was his lamest line. Although sometimes he said it in a funny way, which wasn't his usual. He would say it really quickly and then shoot off a one-liner. No, Link was legitimately a funny asshole in this cartoon. Like, the very last episode of the show when he's just resting in his quarters, a bunch of moblins break in and they all, like, poof each other because they're all incompetent. And then Link just looks around and he's like, man, I'm good. And then later he's telling the story to Zelda, he's like, so there I was, surrounded, moblins everywhere. And Link was just a funny character in this show. And he was endearing. And the relationship between him and Zelda, first of all, this is like one of the only times Zelda has been important in the Legend of Zelda. Let's not forget Nintendo and Shigeru Miyamoto specifically are a little fucking sexist, okay? Peach gets kidnapped all the time, Zelda gets kidnapped all the time, and for a while, Nintendo's most prominent female character was fucking Dixie Kong. So, like Nintendo was...
Samus.
Yeah, in between Metroid games, it was Dixie. And I mean, like, it was Samus and Dixie, and they were carrying Nintendo's female hero leads, basically. Mm-hmm. And Zelda was important in the show. She was the lead support, if not a dual protagonist with Link. And the chemistry these two had was believable. This is one of the only times I liked the tsundere and asshole dynamic in a show, was in this cartoon. Because it worked. Link and Zelda really did want to fuck. And they were so, like Link wanted to be right out and open about it and just get his reward for always doing a good job. And even when she would do a good job, she'd want to reward her with a kiss. He was such a fucking smug asshole about it. He's like, you saved me, princess, kiss me. And Zelda was attracted to him, but always wanted to kind of, like, keep him at arm's length and be a professional about it because she had her own duties. And there were so many good episodes of the show, too. There was quite a lot of adventure and excitement in it. And I think this was also the first time in any media Link was seen with a fucking horse, which became prominent in Zelda. And yet Nintendo fucking likes to just deny this, and stupid-ass Nintendo fanboys like to shit all over this cartoon as though somehow this is not a valid interpretation of Zelda or of Link, a character that has existed in multiple interpretations throughout that world's history. Fuck everything. Fuck those guys.
And yet also the cartoon, or the comic based on this cartoon, was stellar as well.
It was like a more serious version of this, and it was pretty good as well. I mean, this and the intro to this is so good, and the orchestral Zelda music and that taste of high adventure without giving away everything, and a little bit of the humor when Link makes the splashes and bounces off them and lets Zelda fall into the drink. It's just fucking hilarious, man. I love it. I love this. I love the Legend of Zelda cartoon, and I love the intro, and it is, for my money, extraordinarily underrated, and from a literary standpoint, a lot better than most Zelda game stories. Not even kidding. Not even joking. Dave, this was our first intro anime rave. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you think we did?
10.
Okay, simple answer from a simple man. 10. 10 out of 10 for us. Folks, what did you think of this? Did you listen to us talk about intros? Are there any intros you'd like us to do? Just before you make your suggestion, we're probably planning another 80s one, a 90s one for Disney cartoons, including stuff from Disney Afternoon all the way up to stuff like Gravity Falls and Star vs. the Force of Evil. And since this is the anime rave, we probably need to do an anime one. Probably where we look at intros from all the raves we've done, since we don't often talk about the intro in terms of just the intro by itself. If there's any intros you want us to see, or if you think we could have done this any better or worse, maybe you want us to be worse, go to carlsanddaveanimerave.com and let us know. Dave, I want you to sing a catchy 80s riff to end this. Carlos and Dave, anime rave, gonna sign off today. I'm just doing m.a.s.k.